Hi, everyone, and welcome to ProWritingAid 101 for business writers. I'm Micah McGuire, ProWritingAid's Growth Marketing Manager, and today I am joined by Tom Wilde, our Head of Client Solutions. It is awesome to see you all here today. We have a great session planned for you guys. Goal is to have you in and out the door in about 45 minutes, so we've really got everything jam-packed today. For the agenda, we are going to start with some of the most useful reports for business writers, including the Goals Sidebar and RealTime Checker, the Summary Report, the Readability Report, the Style Report, and the Sticky Sentences Report. If we have time, we're also going to cover some of the tools that are outside of our reports, like the Style Guide and the Snippets tool, that our business writers also find super helpful. Now, ultimately, we do want this to be driven by what you guys would like to know. So if you have a question at any point during the walkthrough, please feel free to throw it in that Q&A box. We will have roughly 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A, so we'll make sure to get to as many questions as possible at the time. If for some reason we are unable to answer your question during Q&A, please feel free to email it to hello, H-E-L-L-O, at ProWritingAid.com. And just put in the subject line you were at one of our Business 101s, and we will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, Tom, well, I think that covers our housekeeping for today. Let's go ahead and start with the walkthrough.
Right, thanks, Micah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 101 walkthrough for business users. It's great to have you with us. Apologies, I'm sat in I've got some seagulls right outside my window, so if you can hear seagulls making a noise, that's what that is. Okay, so ProWritingAid and business users. I'm head of client solutions at ProWritingAid, so I spend my time working with customers, many corporate and institutional customers who are looking to get the most out of ProWritingAid, particularly for their teams. And as you'll see this evening or through this session, there are many functions and features within the tool that are built specifically for you guys to help you build your skills and have a writing process that is more effective and more efficient. Many of the customers I work with see very quick benefits from applying or using ProWritingAid within their teams. In fact, one of them recently described it as their second pair of digital eyes, which I think is a really good description. We're going to kick off just by showing you what ProWritingAid looks like in the web editor. And the reason for doing that is the web editor is accessible for all, so everybody can use the web editor. Just making sure you can see that. It does look okay. But also the UI that you see here, so the user interface that you see here with these buttons across the top of the screen, is a UI that we try to replicate in every single integration we have. So our Word add-in, our Outlook add-in, our Chrome extension, our Google Docs add-on, our desktop app, and ProWritingAid Everywhere, our brand new native app for Windows, has exactly the same look and feel. So wherever you're writing, wherever you're using ProWritingAid, it has the same look and feel. For the purpose of this demonstration, I've got a sample document on the screen. This is just a letter to a vendor, or an email rather. I'm going to start just by showing you one of the really simple settings to keep an eye on. So ProWritingAid works in different variations of English. So set that depending on either what your preferred style is within your organization, or you know, where your customer is based. So I tend to work primarily with US customers, so I'm using US English today. And the first thing I'm going to do in the reports is turn on the real-time checker. This is what I always recommend as the first step in using ProWritingAid to all business users. This is like a high-level view of your document, and it's going to make incremental changes, incremental improvements that by the time you reach the end of your document add up to a significant improvement in the clarity, the concision, the readability of what you're trying to say. And all of those things combined mean that you're helping achieve the number one goal, which is the transfer of information from the page or from the screen to your reader's brain is as simple, as pain-free, as frictionless as possible. So let's do that. Let's turn it on. You'll see as I turn it on, the little number appears. It's counting all the possible improvements and mistakes in the document. So we found 30 potential improvements. So there are 30 suggestions in this document so far. And if I continue to type, it'll continue checking until I turn it off. So just a note on that, you know, this is a personal preference point. Some people have the real-time checker on permanently. Some people keep it off and turn it on at the end of each paragraph or the end of each page or the end of the document. It's entirely up to you. Everybody works in a different way. So those 30 issues, they're going to be mistakes, but it's also covering, you know, style and readability issues. So this is where your English may be perfectly grammatically correct, but actually we're suggesting that you could say or you get your point across in a simpler, more effective way. Let's have a look at a few of these. So how to do that is really straightforward. Just hover over the point, over the highlight. You'll see the highlights are color coded. Now, if I actually go over and introduce it to this sidebar, there are two tabs. If we click on improvements, you can see that I can filter the errors I'm looking at. So I can filter and just look at spelling or grammar or style or passive voice. We'll keep all in play right now so we can look at everything. You can also see that I can work through my improvements purely down the side here in the sidebar if I want to. My personal preference is to work in the document itself, but it's just a preference point. Okay, so really simple one, unknown word. You've missed an E in believe. So just click on the green correction and it'll apply it. You probably noticed there's a couple of other options here. So under the suggested fix, so here we've got a missing determiner. Under the suggested fix, you've got a disable rule and ignore. Quick note on those. Ignore is your friend because it will ignore that one instance. Okay, if you disagree, it'll still highlight that issue if the issue appears in the next paragraph, for example, but it will remember the ignore in that position. Disable is permanent. Okay, so if you need to re-enable, you'll need to come back through our support team. So I would be very wary about using disable unless you're absolutely sure you want to turn off a particular rule. Here we've got a missing determiner. What's a determiner? Okay, really simple question, but to be honest, many of us may not know what the determiner is. And when we get onto some of the more complex areas of grammar, there will be lots of knowledge gaps. Use this information icon here to your benefit, because that is where you will find lots of added information about grammar, style, spelling points. They're going to help build your skills, build your capabilities, and make you a better writer. The big difference here is, unlike Grammarly, we're not just fixing your document, we're fixing you. We're helping you become better writers. We're looking at the long game here. Okay, we know, or we think of writing as a science, and we break it down into constituent elements, focus on each and improve on each, and you will become a better writer over time. So let's change that. Let's add the determiner, move on. Readability point, really simple. Things like all of are often totally superfluous. They're not necessary. So we can save the reader, again, more time, more space if we just remove them. Let's move on. You can see I've got an arrow here. I can just make the change and move straight to the next. Okay, just a word as we're going through these things on my other tab in my sidebar here, because this is a really important point. Goals allows you to monitor your skills in terms of by way of metrics. So how to use goals is to set your document type. So what is it you're writing? Here I'm writing an email, pretty much a general email, and it will display a range of metrics that are relevant to that document type. So these metrics here will be different if I say set my document type as a sales email. They're going to look at different things. There will be some duplication, but you'll be looking at different things for sales emails. So you'll see for grammar and spelling, for example, I'm hitting 55% right now. Okay, so my target zone, and these are baked into the tool based on the research we do. So my target zone, your target zone for grammar and spelling should be 80% or higher. So we're under target, 55%. We've got some way to go. Whereas if we look at things like sentence variety, we're on target. So sentence variety should be 4 or higher. Here we're scoring 5.2. Passive voice, although, so we'll look at an example of passive voice in a minute. Passive voice index should be less than 25, and we're scoring 16.7. That's good. So use those metrics, use goals to build a picture of your typical benchmark scores. They help you monitor your improvements over time. We also have many customers that use these as a kind of QA tool. So they set teams the target of hitting a particular level before submitting their email, or sending their email or submitting their report. These are also dynamic. So you'll notice if we watch this score here, 55%, if I make some changes or ignore some changes, you'll see grammar and spelling will start to climb. Okay, it's getting there slowly. I just want to save a couple of these, but yeah, so we're up to 57% now, 61%. In fact, let's get rid of this one as well. Okay, I do want to just highlight this example again, though, before we move on from goals, because it's the passive voice. And I think passive voice is the scourge of business writing. It's technically not incorrect. Grammatically, it's fine, but we tend to overuse the passive voice massively. There are various reasons for why we use passive voice. Sometimes we want to deliberately not highlight the subject of the sentence. Other times we just think it makes it sound more important. But actually, by using a passive voice, again, you're making the transfer of information one step harder. So the active voice is usually better. Again, click on the information icon and you'll get a full explanation about the difference between the passive and the active voice. You'll even have an embedded video to watch with some Jackie Chan examples showing you the transition from the passive to the active voice. And in the tool, you'll see the AI is trying to figure out, or the machine learning rather, is trying to figure out the context of the sentence, and it's suggesting some alternative options written in the active voice. I'd suggest probably this one is the most applicable, so we'll apply that. Okay, so in summary, that's a real-time checker. That's definitely your friend, probably the place to start, and use goals to start building a picture of how your writing skills improve over time and the individual benchmarks where you should be hitting your targets for the various skills within your specific document type.
And also something to keep in mind with goals and these ranges is that for things like passive voice that are more of a stylistic matter, we do try to keep the range a little bit wider. So I think, Tom, it's usually between 1 and 20 for passive voice scoring, something like that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll notice for things like grammar and spelling that have pretty strict tolerances, you want to make sure that you have as few grammar errors and as few spelling errors in any document as possible. Our tolerances are a little lower. For things like passive voice and other stylistic matters, we do try to give you guys more of a range that you can fall in. So it's not as if you're going to be out of range if you use one passive voice sentence.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Micah. And don't forget, okay, writing is it's a personal subject. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. Even good writers can improve. But ProWritingAid is not a writer, okay? It's not a replacement for you to do the writing. It's a writing assistant. So it sits by your side, highlights the improvements you could possibly make. Ultimately, nobody knows the context of what you're trying to communicate better than you. So it's up to you to make those decisions. It's up to you to accept. And it's one of the reasons why we don't auto-correct anything in your documents. Okay, this is all manually accepted. All right, let's dive into some of these other reports because there's a heap more to show you here. I'm going to start by showing you the summary report. The simple reason is this is going to help, along with goals, this is going to help give us a picture of which other reports we want to run. You can imagine with 20 reports here, if you were to run every report, you'd be there all day. Okay, that is not the point. You should be at a position or in a position where you are familiar with those reports and probably running 2, 3, maybe 4 reports each time you get to the end of your document or the end of your page, however you want to do that. And the reports you run will be based on which you find most valuable, which you find most useful. So they're linked to your strengths and weaknesses, which is why the summary report is so useful. Because that will break down your document into a whole range of different metrics at an even deeper level than goals. So we've got the 3 headline scores. We've got grammar, spelling, and style. And we can see here grammar and style are way under target. Then we've got the areas where the document's looking good. Okay, and this is, like I said, this is a really detailed report. If I were to click through, let's say to readability, it'll tell me a little bit about my readability check. Also, it will give me some really interesting information about the fact, and presented in a really simple way. Look, almost probably more than 10% of my paragraphs, although my readability grade is okay, 10% of my paragraphs are still classed as very difficult to read. So that gives you an idea of one of the reports you might want to run when you get back into the tool. Let's go back to the top. Here we've got the documents where the areas where my document needs more work. We're familiar with grammar and style already, but look, we've got sentence length, we've got business jargon, glue index, weak adverbs, positivity. We'll take a look at a few of those now. Let's start with style and grammar. Now, as business writers, you'll find the reports on the left-hand end probably where you're focusing. Some of the other reports over here are, diction, cliches, much more relevant to creative writers. Style and grammar are 2 good examples of really important reports. They work in a very similar way to the RealTime Checker in terms of they are a simple one-click correction report. Okay, so in fact, many of these changes you may have already fixed in the RealTime Checker, but this is going at a slightly deeper level, and it's bringing together all of your corrections category by category. So here I can see all of my business jargon phrases grouped together, and I can go through one at a time, correcting them if I want to. So cutting edge, really, do you want to say cutting edge? It's a little bit kind of business jargon. It might be applicable, but groundbreaking is probably better. Bandwidth, oh gosh, that really is some boardroom bingo, isn't it? So bandwidth, let's change that for capacity or spare capacity. So you can see I just work through down through each one at a time. It's got my passive verbs here. It's got adverbs. It's got readability enhancements. These are really good ones. These are where you're going to save your reader time by removing superfluous words. Okay, the majority of, just change that to most. Be able to, okay, we can just get rid of that without changing the meaning of the sentence. So there's loads under readability enhancements. So these reports, sorry, Mike, you about to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that a lot of times we do get users asking, okay, what cases do I need to be using, say, the RealTime Checker versus diving into the reports, maybe through the summary report or something like that. And we always say that it's kind of a matter of what you're writing. Really, if you're writing something that's fairly short that you can get done in a, it's only a page or 2 long, that might be a better use case for the RealTime Checker, because you're probably going to have less that you need to go back and check. You're going to have less that you have to kind of work through click by click in those cases, because the big thing about the RealTime Checker is if you have a super long document that you have 400, 500 changes, and yes, it is possible to have that many, it can get overwhelming very quickly, even if you are filtering. So it can tend to be much easier with a longer document to say, go into the summary report and go report by report, because it does kind of give you almost blinders so you can work on just that area, and it keeps you from being so overwhelmed. So we always recommend, if you're working on something short like an email, something like that, RealTime Checker and goals sidebar is where you'd probably want to be. If you're working on a document that you have either a very long document or it's something you're coming back to edit after having written it previously, a long time ago, and you're coming back to try to edit it, then probably summary report and the individual reports are going to be a better path for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Micah. Thanks for that. Before we get into some other reports, I'm just going to talk a moment to those of you who are kind of like us at ProWritingAid, kind of language lovers, linguists or wannabe linguists, and find words fascinating. Because there's a couple of tools in here, not only the thesaurus report, which really helps broaden your vocabulary range and your knowledge around words, but we've got an inbuilt tool called the Word Explorer. If I double click on any word, it opens our Word Explorer. And that will simply list a range of synonyms for that particular word I've clicked on. But I can go deeper and really get into the detail of that particular word at a definition level. So in the terms of team, we've got as a verb and a noun, I can look at different definitions. I've got a full thesaurus with other synonyms and contextually related words and synonyms. I've even got collocations, so I can look at adjectives that might be used before, hyphenated adjectives that might be used before team, adverbs might be used before team. There really is a whole lot of detail there. Why this is important is that as humans, we tend to use very narrow vocabularies, okay? You rely on the same words time and time again. But as writers, and particularly as readers, what keeps us interested is variety, okay? So try and broaden your vocabulary. And there's some reports that will really help with this too. Let's dive straight in with the all repeats report, because it's one of my favorites. This looks at patterns, which computers are great at doing, right? Human eye less so. But all repeats is looking at how often you're repeating particular words or multi-word phrases. So you can see, don't worry too much about the color in the document. I can see in the sidebar here that I'm saying the same 3 words in a row twice. So to carry out, I'm using that twice, and to move forward, both quite kind of jargonistic phrases, right? And actually, twice isn't too bad, but you probably wouldn't notice if you were using them 5, 6, 7 times in a short report. If I were to click on them, ProWritingAid will show you some alternative kind of related phrases that you could use just to broaden your vocabulary to ensure you're not being too repetitive. So use reports like all repeats. Overuse is another great one, as is echoes. They all look at similar areas but different. Even under all repeats, you can see just single words. So I'm using the word team 6 times. Again, great indicator where you're just being repetitive. Okay, let's dive into a couple of other reports. And I want to show you these reports because they work in a different way. They're what I call advisory reports. So for example, the sentence length report. We know sentence lengths are really important for ensuring readability. The longer the sentence, the more likely your reader is to switch off. But again, sometimes we don't realize how long our sentence length or our typical sentence length is. Well, this report will help you. It gives you a really simple pictorial representation of the length of each sentence chronologically through the document. So I can immediately see and navigate to, in this example, the 48-word sentence. And a 48-word sentence really is about 3 times as long as you should be using. Okay, it's a kind of sentence when, but that by the time you get to the last word, you've got to go back to the beginning and remind yourself what the sentence was talking about in the first place. So with this report, it's giving you advice, but it's not going to rewrite that for you. That's down to you. If you want to improve the readability or focus on the sentence length, you need to ensure your average words per sentence is as low as possible. And for readability purposes, as we'll come on to now, you also want to look at your average number of syllables per word. So the readability report gives me some simple readability statistics. You're probably familiar with either ProWritingAid or Kincaid grade. We offer a couple of others as well. And then importantly, it looks at a paragraph level and tells you which of my paragraphs are the most difficult to read. And here we have it. This paragraph rates as, what are we on? I think we're on about a 42.5. Really, you should be aiming for 70. So when it comes to ProWritingAid, you want to be up around upper 60 to 70. And the way to do that, like I said, is make sure your sentences are short, or your average number of words per sentence is low. And you want to reduce the average number of syllables per word. But again, you need to do that. Okay, you know the context much better than any machine possibly can. And although we are working on a paraphrasing tool, which will have an impact on some of these reports, nobody can edit or come up with the correct paragraph as well as you can, because you know what should be there.
And just tips for kind of working through this report if you are trying to get the readabilities of a certain paragraph down or something like that. Again, like Tom says, focus on the number of words per sentence. Look for words that are obviously very multisyllabic and see through the word explorer, are there things, other options that you could use that might be shorter. You can also, if you are completely stuck, use both the style report and the sticky sentences report in conjunction with this readability report, because as you saw with the style report, we do have readability suggestions. So there may be words you may be able to remove entirely from a certain paragraph, something like that. With the sticky sentences report that Tom, I think we may have some time to show them that as well. That is going to show you areas that basically you have sentences that can be shortened because you have a high number of glue words. And Tom, I'll let you take over explaining glue words, but both of these reports kind of act as almost the tripod of readability.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's a really good way of describing it, actually. So yeah, sticky sentences, my number one report for business writers, and it's unique to ProWritingAid, and it looks at what we call glue words. Glue words are the 200 most commonly used words in the English language. So they are your prepositions, your articles. They're the words that glue the working words together. Working words in a sentence tend to be nouns and verbs, and it is verbs more than anything else that bring your writing to life. People read verbs. So our research tells us that if you've got a high proportion of glue words in your sentence, then it's going to slow your reader down. It's going to be sticky. So what the sticky sentences check is doing is it's highlighting those sentences with a high proportion of glue words, typically over 40%. So we've got two settings here. We've got sticky and semi-sticky sentences. So semi-sticky sentences are the less sticky ones. I would work through both. And again, you can just navigate to either. Navigate to any of them by clicking on the arrow. It'll take you to it. So here's a great example. The rest of the company is not as expeditious in catching up with us. Okay, some really lovely words in there. And we know with 64% of those words are glue words, the chances are you could say the same thing much more efficiently, much more effectively. Again, this is about saving your reader time and effort. You'll also see here that the early version of the paraphrasing report that we've got is working in the background here and trying to rewrite this in a less sticky way. Now, you may disagree. This may not be the perfect interpretation of your sentence, but again, it might give you the beginnings of what's right, or it might be a perfect fit. So here, rather than the rest of the company is not as expeditious in catching up with us, well, you could easily say the rest of the company is slow in catching up, okay? And that will impact your readability. So if we now run the readability report, it'll have an impact on the score. Now we've still got a low readability score, so we've got more work to do on the paragraph, but this is one step at a time. You'll need to make several changes, work on each sentence to see the improvements overall.
And you'll notice, I think we are up a point on that flesh reading e-score. I think we were around 42.5 previously to editing that sticky sentence. So it is incremental improvements, but the more incremental improvements you get, basically the faster you'll have that readability up to snuff.
Yeah, absolutely that. Okay, with that, I think we've probably been through most of the reports we wanted to highlight. The best thing to do after the demonstration today is go away and get to know some of those reports, get a feel for which ones are most valuable to you, delivering the most impact, the most change. Let us know if you've got any questions and explore. Take your time to explore. What I'm going to go on to now is to show you a couple of things around customization, and then we'll finish off with some kind of discussion around ROI. Actually, just before I do that, let's take a quick look at what this looks like in some of the other integrations. I mentioned the UI looks the same wherever you use ProWritingAid. I've got Word open here. You can see I've got ProWritingAid installed as a tab on my tool my toolbar, and you can see I've got all the reports here. And I can turn the RealTime Checker on. It works in exactly the same way. It'll take a few seconds. Hang on, let me just turn it off and on again. It'll take a few seconds. And then it will return the results just like the RealTime Checker did in the web editor. There we go. I can see my results and my goals there. If I go into, let's go into Gmail, where I have the Chrome extension installed, and you can see, here it is installed. You can see the RealTime Checker is working here. Underline the words exactly the same way. Now I don't have that toolbar here But if I go to the ProWritingAid logo, the target symbol in the bottom right-hand corner of the active window, I can open my goals sidebar, and I can even open the full editor. So here I have the access to all of those deeper reports. I can make changes and I can apply those changes back into the document. Okay, let's move on. I've got another screen open where I want to show you a little bit about Style Guide rules because they're so important for corporate customers who have a defined style. And it's one of the great advantages about ProWritingAid. It allows you to build custom style rules. Now, style rules and the Style Guide tool is a really powerful engine, and it handles everything from very, very basic rules to very complex. These are some of the ones that the team at ProWritingAid have built over time. I'm going to start with a really simple one. This is an example of a kind of find and replace rule, if you like. So we've got a sample wrong sentence. Sorry, in fact, just to give you the context, this is from the University of Pennsylvania. University of Pennsylvania is their brand name, yet most staff and students at University of Pennsylvania refer to it as Pennsylvania University. University of Reading in the UK has exactly the same issue, people calling it Reading University. So the university built a really simple rule here. They use a sample wrong sentence, and then they specify the match, specify the replacement, add a message for the user, test the rule. Okay, the rule is green. That's great. That means it's good. If it were red, there's some problems in the logic. We'll copy that and save it. And let's just go back into this document. Paste that sentence, that wrong sentence here, and turn on the real-time checker. Okay, it's already found it. And there's the message that I created. So that's a custom rule that we've built. Now, we have a couple of articles on our blog that can help you get started with creating Style Guide rules. These can get very complex, and we do have a service where we can automate your Style Guide for you. Just send us a copy of the Style Guide. We will review it, tell you how long we think it's going to take. However, if you're just looking for help, guidance on, troubleshooting one or two rules you're trying to build, just get in touch and we can certainly help with that. I'm going to give you an example of a slightly more complex rule. Let's have a look at this one here. So this one focuses on what in the UK we refer to or might refer to as a Marmite word. You either love it or hate it, and that is impactful. A lot of people really dislike impactful. It's a really weak adjective. You can use much better, more meaningful adjectives. So it's a simple match, right? It's incredibly impactful is the sample wrong sentence. The match is impactful, but incredibly is an adverb, and adverbs are unnecessary. Adverbs are often used before the word impactful, and we want to include that in the match and get rid of it. We don't need it. So we create this rule with what's called a POS tag. It's a linguistic tag that defines adverb. So RB means adverb. It means that any adverb that is preceding the word impactful will be found. It doesn't have to be incredibly, it could be any adverb. And by using a tilde in these brackets here, we're telling the machine that it's optional. So if there is no adverb there, we can just match impactful. If there's an adverb there, we'll include it in the match. And then we list our replacement options. We separate each with an @ symbol, which means it will be listed as separately clickable entities. Again, we'll test the rule. That works well. Take a sample, go into the document, just add that twice, and we'll remove the adverb from one of them. Turn on the real-time checker, and there we go. So again, slightly more complex rule using POS tagging. And we can go much, much deeper than this as well, even using kind of regular expression to define date sequences and things like that.
And you'll find more on that in the Creating Advanced Style Guide Rules article that has been linked in the chat. That will cover the parts of speech, tagging, all of that good stuff, so you can get on writing these kind of more complex rules.
Great. Okay, so the other feature I wanted to show you was snippets. Snippets is our our text expansion tool. So it's really useful if you're writing emails or policy documents or reports where you have template text you want to drop in. So snippets allows you to do that. You can create snippets in separate folders depending on the nature of the snippet. I use a lot of emails for talking to customers, and I pre-format some of those. So here you've got, in fact, let me just bring up a probably slightly better one. This is a welcome email to people joining a team trial for a month-long period. I've created and formatted the email, the body of the email. Here I've got I created a shortcut here, which means when I'm in my document, if I just start typing the name of the shortcut, you'll see it lists everything to do with team there. I can find my snippet and just drop it straight in. So if you're working in customer service, or if you're working in other areas where you're finding using the same chunk of text time and time again, snippets is a really powerful tool for that.
And also it's rich text. So again, as you can see, you can include links, text formatting, anything like that. So as long as you are entering into a rich text box, all of the formatting will remain intact.
That's it. Great. Couple of words just before we wrap up. We have a couple of new, or one new dashboard in particular that's really useful, our team analytics dashboard. If you have a team license, any administrators can view this on your team license, and it basically just shows them the engagement of the team over a set period of time. So I can see, for example, in the last month that my team of users here at ProWritingAid, 98% of them were active. They use ProWritingAid in one way or another. I can look at the breakdown on a day-to-day basis. On Friday, June 17th, I had 76 active users. I can even see the number of improvements that they made. So those are the number of suggestions they accepted in that time period, and an estimated cost saving and time saving too. Across the top, you can see similar metrics based on the entirety of the contract length. So from when the contract started, or when the use of ProWritingAid started. And importantly, we've included bias improvements here. So this tells you specifically how many suggestions have been accepted for non-inclusive terms. Okay, and I think that's where we're going to wrap up. Micah, anything I've missed?
Yeah, I think just the last thing we need to hit on before we jump into our Q&A, because we do have a very interesting question around the plagiarism check, but it's security. You know, because I know that we have a lot of clients that are probably dealing with secure documents and want to make sure that everything is safe with us.
Yeah, really good point. And it's a really important point. At ProWritingAid, we prioritize security above everything else. It's as simple as that. So how we handle your text, any grammar spell checker like ProWritingAid that is using machine learning is transmitting your text for analysis. None of this can happen on your own individual machine. So to do that, we need to do it securely. So we encrypt all data that we transmit. Our servers are hosted by cloud service providers, Azure, Microsoft Azure, and we use their data center in the West US, so specifically US focused. The big differences, however, with us compared to others in the marketplace is that when you use ProWritingAid, there is no persistence or storage of your data. So once your text is analyzed, and the results are returned to you as HTML tags, we delete your text. So we don't store copies of your text in any way, shape, or form. And added to that, on the privacy point, we don't have the rights to use your work. Again, if you're using any spell checker that's similar to this, always check the small print, because many of them will claim rights or a license, unbeknown to many users, that mean that they can use your text for many different purposes. Now, we don't need to do that because we don't use your text to train our machine learning models. We actually use text that we acquire from professional editors, vast quantities of text. So we have no rights to use your text. We believe it is, your work is your work. So yeah, it's a really important point to make. And
also,
Sorry, Micah.
Just ultimately, the only kind of data persistence that's really even possible with our system is if you are using the web editor and saving documents. And that's not because we want access to your documents or anything like that. It's because in order to provide you with the documents you've saved previously, we have to have those stored somewhere so they can be then fed back when you visit your document sidebar. So that's the only data persistence that's possible when it comes to using any of our extensions, anything like that. None of it stays in our cloud.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that if you're a Teams user and that's a concern that people could save a document within the web editor, then we can disable the web editor for Teams users. So we can stop any of your team having access to the web editor, something we do on quite a regular basis. Okay, should we dive into some questions?
Yes, so we have one very interesting one on plagiarism that is particularly around documents for academia. So this user is saying that they understand the feature covers billions of web pages, but what's the depth of the check, say, compared with Turnitin, Grammarly, or any other plagiarism checking service?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you for that. And it's quite a difficult one to answer, to be honest, because everyone's a little bit it's difficult to get, you know, that depth of information from any provider, specifically what their sources are. And we're likewise, we go into, we do cover billions and billions of web pages. However, the simplest thing to do here is to test it against other providers. So if that's something you want to look into more, we can provide some credits for you to test the plagiarism tool. I can't be more specific than that, really, other than say, you know, we do our own testing. And our results suggest that we compare favorably. Obviously, Turnitin are the market leader, and this is pretty much all they do. But our results compare favorably with Turnitin. But I'd really encourage you to give it a go yourself and see. The biggest difference, really, with something like Turnitin and ProWritingAid is that you know, our plagiarism checker is a report that the writer uses. It's not something that is downloadable. It's not something that we create as a separate PDF that you can then forward. It's something that individual users use just to make that check before submitting something. But it's not, you know, we don't have a kind of plagiarism dashboard as such, or a downloadable report feature.
And I think that covers our questions for the Q&A. Fortunately, just at time for today's session. If you guys happen to think of any questions afterwards, again, you are free to email them to hello@prowritingaid.com, and we'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we hope you guys enjoyed today's walkthrough and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.